to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you for coming out on this evening. We didn't get torn away from a really beautiful evening, so. Do you have an audit resolution, Alice?
It's in the folder there. Yes, just one voucher.
It was missed last Wednesday.
Want me to read it?
I believe it has to be read into the minutes.
Town Board authorizes the supervisor to pay general fund voucher 62 dated March 16, 2016 in the amount of $615.42.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call the vote.
Councilperson Bryant?
Aye.
Councilperson Carpenter?
Aye.
Councilperson Handstein?
Aye.
Councilperson Miles?
Aye.
Supervisor Ryder?
Aye. And before I forget, Mike, you want to stay after the meeting so we can arrange this meeting with Danby?
Sure.
Okay. And with that, we'll open the formal part of this meeting, which is the board discussion on the draft environmental impact statement of the modified wind farm project. Is there somebody, board member, who's dying to open the meeting? Open the discussion?
Well, I'll open it up with what we discussed last night. Most of the meeting we spent discussing how the committee should, what the involvement should be on this. And we decided as a committee, and thanks Mike for actually looking up the resolution that formed the committee to look at the specifics in terms of the committee providing advice back to the board. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the mechanism for and how to do that. So we decided that we were going to, well, we did divide up into subgroups that would look at and divide up the issues between each subgroup, and each group would come up with a report, and we discussed that as a group. And with the intent to providing advice back to the town board on our findings. We have a lot of information that we've collected on our Trello site, a lot of documents. We have a lot of, we've had, several technical experts that we've discussed. So the goal would be to summarize what we have found so far and provide advice back to that. So the subgroups, we just divided up last night, but since it just happened, we haven't had a lot of time to work on it yet. But we will be working on it aggressively. So. You want to add anything, Mike, to that?
Well, I think the main thing would be to figure out the timing that's going to fit what the needs of the board are. We left it be that we would have a report for the next board meeting, but I wonder if that's soon enough to happen for how we want to proceed with what we're going to do with that information. And that has to do with deciding what we want to do with that information. So that would be a first step, deciding how we want that information formatted, what we want to do with it, what the timing would be to have it in order to do with it what we want to do with it, and how to proceed from there, basically. That makes sense?
Well, with the board, the business before the board, there was an email from Frank Pavia back the end of December on the process that we have to go through with the supplemental draft environmental statement. And I don't know if all of you have that email
Was it on
on update. But
was it on the town site?
no,
I don't remember seeing it, but.
no. The process is, well, Alan will make a few more copies.
Mhm. Got it.
Just gonna make copies of it too. Thanks.
And there's one for Alice. So this is the process we have to file, and we're down to step 2. Now, we're actually through step 3. The 30-day, and we're in the midst of step 4. A 30-day comment period has commenced, and the town is holding a public hearing on March 28th. The court's in April. Okay,
Sorry, I
March
moved out last
28th,
week.
at 7 o'clock at the elementary school. And following the end of the public comment period, which I believe is April 12. Labella, on behalf of the town board, will prepare a final supplemental environmental statement. I would suspect that this will take 2 weeks, that process, step number 5, and will be brought back to the town board.
Who actually works, I mean, the town board is ultimately responsible for the final EIS, but who actually works on it? You're saying Labella's gonna work on the final?
Right, we have hired Labella to
do-
be our technical consultant.
Okay, and they will actually do the work on preparing
Yes,
the final EIS.
yes.
Which involves what?
They have to record every comment that comes in during the 30-day period. And they have to review the minutes of the public hearing and address all of those comments from the public hearing. I would assume, and this is only my opinion, that they would bunch those
Right.
questions. I do not believe it will be an individual answer to every individual question.
Right, I guess my question then becomes, if Labella is answering those questions, how do they know what to answer if they're not the wind farm?
They are technical advisors. They have initials after their name. Most of them are engineers. The ones that I know of are engineers, certified to work in New York State.
Right, and that gives them some engineering expertise, but it doesn't give them a way to answer questions that have to do with the process of the wind farm's development and building out their project.
This is an environmental impact statement that the New York State requires a project of this sort to do.
During this process, we can ask questions of LaBella to make sure that if we find issues with this, with things that we want included or missing,
Yeah.
we can ask LaBella to include those parts.
And we feel as a board, or no, I feel that they are technically qualified to get those answers, right?
Who's technically qualified to get the answers from whom?
They have an obligation, we have an obligation, the board, to address items that the environmental impact statement wants projects like this to answer.
So every comment is part of what
Well,
they consider.
I've been told they have to give a response to questions asked. Now, I didn't ask, well, they answer every question. They can't answer money questions,
No.
I don't think. But the environmental impact statement is, I've never read the New York State law, but it's about these subjects:
Right.
traffic and transportation, biological resources, climate and air quality, water resources, geology, soils and topography, land use and zoning, community facilities and services, growth and community character, historical, culture and archaeological resources, agriculture resources, aesthetic and visual resources, open space and recreation, socioeconomics, public safety, noise, communication, facilities. I assume that these are all the subject areas that is required in any environmental impact statement in New York State.
Those are the subject areas. The question is maybe a little more complicated, though. Let's say that there's an area that mitigation procedures, and every area in there has to have a mitigation for problems. One of the
Yes.
subject areas is a mitigation for problem. Let's say there's an area where there are problems that people feel aren't mitigated, and there is no conflict resolution process to deal with them in the supplemental draft TIS. I can't really see LaBella being able to take on the responsibility for answering that. I could see them presenting it as an issue and as a problem, but how would they answer that question?
Well, they're going to base their opinions on conventional science.
Well, conventional science doesn't deal with conflict resolution. Let's say you want a conflict resolution procedure in the environmental impact statement, and there isn't one in there. How would you go about getting one in there? Let's say you make a comment on it and say, there is no conflict resolution procedure in this supplementary draft environmental impact statement. We feel like there is one necessary to happen. How would LaBella deal with that?
LaBella's operating under the state law. If the state law does not require
There is no state law requirement in this area. It's town law. It's us. It's the town of Enfield that requires these things. There's no state law on this. There's no federal law on this.
On conflict resolution or an environmental impact
On wind
statement?
farms.
No, there is no state law on wind farms. There is no state law on wind farms. It is our local law that
Right.
is governing that.
Exactly.
And within the local law, there is a complaint process.
Let's say that the complaint process that they've projected in their environmental impact statement isn't satisfactory to us. Let's say we-
I don't understand why you think the Lobella is going to bring up that.
Well, that's exactly what I'm asking. Why would Labella have anything to do with that? If there are a number of statements in the public hearing or beyond the public hearing where people say, we feel like this is a problem, including town board members say, we feel like this is a problem, how can Labella deal with that issue? What's the process that Labella can deal with that issue? Because they can't make determinations for Black Oak Wind Farm.
No.
What's the process?
Where are we going with this? Where are you going with this?
Where are we going with it? This is the core of the whole issue.
I understand.
What I want to know is, what can Labella do about somebody bringing up a comment that there's no conflict resolution procedure in the draft environmental supplemental into EIS? What
It's
can
not
Labella do
required
about
by
that?
the New York State law.
What's not required?
A conflict resolution, I don't think.
It's required by us, by the town, not by New York State, by us, Enfield.
Right.
We require it.
Right,
So if it's not in their draft environmental supplemental,
but that's not part of the draft it's part of our law, but it's not part of the
it
draft.
certainly is part of the draft environmental impact statement. It's mentioned many, many, many times in the draft environmental impact statement. It's just that the procedure is very faulty and has no teeth in it. They mentioned it many, many, many times if you read the environmental impact statement.
When you
You
say
mean
mention
that-
that, what are you referring to specifically?
Conflict resolution procedures, problems getting fixed.
It wasn't called,
In the law?
the what did it? Oh, do I have the law? I think I have the law. Well, they don't use the term conflict. But yes, there is.
Problems, it doesn't matter to me what term we use, issues.
Yes. They
I'm-
refer back to the complaint resolution process that needs to be set up by Black Oak Wind Farm as outlined in the law.
Section 1, Article 3, Section 1, Item 11. The application will include a proposed complaint resolution process to address complaints from persons who live in nearby residences. The process may use an independent mediator or arbitrator and shall include a time limit for acting upon any complaint. Okay, I don't feel like,
That's in the law,
this is in our.
in our law.
Wind
Yes.
law.
And
We
you don't
require
like that.
I'm saying that they haven't done that to my satisfaction in their, the wind farm hasn't
Okay,
done it to my
that's cutting to
satisfaction.
the chase, that's what I want to hear, yeah.
So how does Labella deal with the fact that I don't think that they've dealt with that issue?
And what in the law makes you think Labella has to?
It's not the law. It's the fact that I make a comment to the draft supplemental environmental impact statement and they have to deal with my comment. That's what we just were talking about, is they have to deal with the comments that are made about this document. So they have to do something with my comment. What are they gonna do with it? That's what I wanna know.
I don't know.
Well, that's my concern, is all I.
Oh. Oh. So your concern is how Labella is going to respond to any comment that comes in during this period that says they don't like the resolution process.
My concern is how will Labella respond to any comment that comes in during this time period that has anything to do with how the Black Oak Wind Farm is doing things that they don't have the right to say that the Black Oak Wind Farm will do differently. Among them, the complaint resolution process. And perhaps it's not their position to do that. But again, as I was talking to Mr. Pavia last week, if we don't bring that up somewhere in the process and wait till the finding statement, when we write the finding statement and say, oh, by the way, you have to do X, Y, and Z now, it seems to me not beneficial to the whole process, either to the wind farm or to the town board or to the neighborhood in question, that we just leave it to the last minute and then say, oh, there's a problem here. You didn't deal with it. It seems to me we would want to have some awareness of that problem in our response to the draft supplemental environmental impact statement, so that they could deal with it in the final one that
It
gets
says in
presented.
number 11, complaint resolution plan, the application will include a proposed complaint resolution process to address complaints from persons who live in nearby residences. The process may use an independent mediator or arbitrator and shall include a time limit for acting upon any complaint.
Exactly.
Page 8. I forget which, sorry.
Is that a permitting process?
But there is something there. Article 3, number 7, number 11.
Is that outside the scope of the EIS?
Pardon me?
Is it
No,
outside-
it's dealt with in the EIS many, many
Yeah,
different places.
Many times, yeah.
But it's not dealt with to any real, there's nothing really there about it. It's a very nebulous statement. It doesn't really say much of anything. And it has no rights or powers in it.
And for the record, I share Mike's concerns.
I'm sorry, Henry,
I share Mike's concerns about settling these.
If you go to the draft environmental impact statement, the first one we got, Appendix U, there is a statement there. It's called the community outreach. And that is referred to a number of different times in different places in the environmental impact statement as being the mitigation procedure that will be
Yes,
addressed with.
yes.
But if you read that community outreach statement, to me, it's not at all strong enough to represent what we were asking for in our wind law from Black Oak. So I think that needs to be changed by Black Oak. And, I mean, LaBella obviously can't change that.
Why do you think the wind farm needs to change it?
Because we are requiring the wind farm to do that. We are requiring the wind farm in our wind law
Yes,
to do exactly that, to have a complaint resolution procedure.
right.
So if we are not happy with their complaint resolution procedure, it's our job as the town board to tell them that.
So, do you recollect that you have ever gotten a paper copy of their resolution complaint?
Yes.
You
I
have.
got it with my draft environmental impact statement. It's Appendix U.
Must be the
But you
original.
don't like Appendix U. You don't think it's adequate.
It's not adequate. That's a great way to put it, yes.
Ah,
My words are failing me tonight, I'm sorry.
It's a double header.
Appendix U.
And that's in the original draft.
That's
Yeah,
the
that's the
original
original
draft,
draft,
yeah.
Not the supplemental draft.
Not this.
No.
Not this
no.
one.
There's no Appendix U in this one.
No, anything that doesn't have to be changed
It's
in,
not.
in future environmental impact statements doesn't get put into the future one because it's assumed that the draft one actually is the basis for the law, for what they're,
Well, the FEIS, the final, that appendix U,
there's a lot of information that's not in the FEIS
Right.
that's in the draft.
okay.
So the draft has more information than the final does, basically. And all that information in the draft one that is not in the final one, all applies. It's all valid.
Believe me, I went through it. It does run together after a while.
Right, they do, yeah.
So you do not think that Appendix U should have been passed on as the final?
For myself, in my opinion, I find that having looked into the process and having looked further into the information that they've given and understanding much more clearly what should be required in the situation, that their original complaint resolution procedure is inadequate. And whether or not it should have been passed, who knows? If I had understood what I understand now back then, I probably would have said something back then, but I didn't, and I didn't back then.
So you feel that Labella is probably inadequate to pass judgment on Appendix U?
Well, that's my question, really. I mean, that's really the issue that I'm trying to understand now, is Labella is answering questions that people have about this draft supplemental environmental impact statement. What basis are they answering questions that relate to issues that are wind farm specific, that are Black Oak wind farm specific things, rather than general questions in relation to the law, in relation to the environmental impact statement, in relation to past environmental impact statement? New questions that come up in people's minds that actually would ask for the Black Oak wind farm to define more clearly something, their policies or their procedures, for them to possibly supplement the procedures, for them to possibly change something in the process, change a location or change a procedure or change a mitigation factor. If these comments are asking for that, then how does that get transferred onto, does it just get listed in all of this correspondence information like it did in the original draft environmental impact statement that switched over to the final? If you read the final environmental impact statement that we approved, you'll see there's pages and pages and pages of questions by many different people. Labella has answered many of them. I guess maybe Labella answered them all, but there are a lot of different people, and Labella asked some of their own questions. And I had thought, and I might be wrong, that someone other than Labella also answered some of these questions, and perhaps I'm wrong about that. But I had assumed that it wasn't just Labella that was going to answer questions in this. I assumed that the wind farm had some procedure in the process. If you go to the final environmental impact statement, starting on page,
That's the one that was passed a year ago.
somewhere
More
around in
than
there.
a year ago.
Yeah, I don't think it has a date on it, but November 2014
Right,
is what
Oh.
what it says on the front.
yeah. All right, well, let's keep our environmental impact statement straight.
Yeah.
So, you're talking about, I mean, you have been talking about Appendix U in the material that we got 3 weeks ago.
No.
No.
Appendix
No.
U
It's
is
part of
in the original draft environmental impact statement that came back in 2012, maybe, somewhere in that range.
Right, that's when that came back. There is no appendix U in,
Well, I,
So here, let me read a quick question here.
I didn't want to, that's where my confusion comes in.
Let me do this then, Ann. So I'm on page 37 of the final environmental impact statement, okay?
From a year, 2 years ago.
From 2 years ago, right?
I didn't bring that with me.
Well, let me just, is it okay if I read a couple of things?
Sure.
It's a little more clear, but maybe more confusing too. So in 4.0, it says response to public comments. The draft environmental impact statement for the Black Oak Wind Farm project was accepted as complete by the lead agency June 12, 2013, and copies were delivered to involved interested agencies and posted to a website. Opportunities for detailed agency and public review were provided during the DIS public comment period, including a public hearing conducted by the lead agency. Written and oral comments received during the draft environmental impact statement public comment period are summarized and addressed in this FEIS.
Yes.
38 separate comment letters, hard copy, email, and oral, were received that has resulted in 141 individual comments being considered during this final EIS analysis. The transcripts of the public hearing and the written comments are included in FEIS Appendix M. Tables summarizing the commenters by number and by name are provided below. Following the table, each of the specific comments received on the draft environmental impact statement are addressed in separate responses. So then there's a table right here which has all of the comments or questions that were asked, and it has Labella Associates as number 1, then Dave Bach, Taylor Peck, Gene Ty, Nancy Sparrow. Many people up to, well, in the 50s and 60s, whatever it might be. So then we go on to the next page, which is comments and responses. Okay, so this is a summary of the comments and responses from these people to the draft environmental impact statement. So Labella Associates has comment 1A, comment 1B, comment 1C, comment 1D, and then they have answers to these: response 1A, response 1B, so forth and so on. And let's go to comment 1F from Labella. There is a comment and a question from Labella in there, and then the answer starts with the project sponsor provided the following response. So assumably, Labella in this process then went to Black Oak during the process and collected responses from Black Oak and then brought them back to this section and put them in. So it looks like to me that Labella is actually acting in our stead for answering questions wherever they need to find the answers. And I would
But
think,
that's part of what we hired them for, right?
I would think it would be, yeah. But I would think that the responses then are coming from, well, it doesn't really say, because the response doesn't say who made the comments. Whether Labella made the comments, whether Black Oak Wind Farm made the comments. So
You mean the responses?
the responses, yes, sorry. So I guess I'm just trying to understand the process better and find out what's going on with it, so I know how better to deal with it. And the main thing I'm concerned with in terms of dealing with it is where in the process does the town board have a place in what's going on, what's going to happen? Do we have a desire to be part of this response process, or do we want to just leave this to Labella to either answer from their own knowledge and understanding and experience, or also go and find answers from Black Oak, or perhaps find answers from somebody else as well? Or do we want to actually have a part in it and do a back and forth with Labella and say, that's interesting, how are you going to answer that one? We're looking for this. And I ask that because sometimes the answers I found in here I thought were really, really good and quite adequate, but sometimes I found the answers that didn't really feel like they addressed the question in the way that I would want to understand them. Maybe with a completeness, or maybe with a focus that was different than what I felt the comment was asking for. Usually it was pretty good, but there were some areas sometimes where I thought, well, that doesn't really make sense, that answer in relation to that question. So how much does the town board want to be part of this process, or should we be part of this process? And how much should we just leave to Labella, wait till the final supplemental environmental impact statement is issued, then go on from there and make any changes that we want in the process, or ask for any change or we want in the process in the finding statement, which is my understanding of where we are supposed to speak up and say we want something different, or we feel like this is incomplete. I guess if all those issues have been dealt with in the responses in the final environmental impact statement, then that would be fine. But if they didn't deal with them, then we would have to go on to the finding statement and deal with them again in the finding statement and say, we made a comment as the town board to Labella as the responder to the draft supplemental environmental impact statement that we feel was not dealt with in the way that we need it dealt with. Therefore, we take that comment and put it into the finding statement and say, this hasn't been dealt with yet, you still have to deal with this issue. That makes sense?
No, you lost me.
Well, it makes sense to me.
Well, I am talking a little crazy, sorry.
Oh, I mean, when we hired Labella to do this work for us, to answer the comments because they're engineers and they have the technical knowledge and so on.
Right.
And if we still find things that don't gel, don't meet
Right,
what our criteria, or what we're still, it's words and we don't feel it's adequate enough, then we as the board, as we've hired them, have a right to, but not a right, but we should ask the same question again, or say, can you come at me with some more information, right? Or am I?
well, and we could do that by not approving the final supplemental environmental impact statement also. We could get it back and then we could say, wait a minute, these things were not addressed, and actually the procedure, the state procedure allows the town board to do that multiple times in a row, as long as their comments are substantive and they actually have something to say that
Right.
really has, meaning and significance to the issue. And it says, you can go through that process time and time again. in order
But our replying to the, as you've just said, it has to address our findings about, our feelings or findings about the way they've addressed an issue
Right.
not being adequate.
It has
Right.
to be substantial,
It has to be supportive and substantive.
substantive.
But my concern is that, well, I'd rather not make it so we have to keep going back and forth and saying, well, wait a minute, you didn't understand what we were saying, you didn't address the issue, whatever. It seems like if we could inject ourselves into the process somewhere during the process and say, how we doing? What about this issue? And they say, well, yeah, we're dealing with it this way, and you say, well, gee, I would thought maybe that should be addressed or whatever. Or should we just stay out of it and let them do what they do?
All right, in this
Wait.
current one that you received,
Right,
you have some issues with
Yes.
what's already here.
I do,
And you could write those down
yes,
on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of paper.
yeah.
Well, it seems like that would be the place to start.
Well, and I definitely will do that for the comments that we're gonna go to Labella. I mean, I would think we would do that individually, and I thought we were coming here tonight as a board to talk about actually how we wanted to do that, what the process we wanted to use for doing that, whether we wanted as a board to do that as a whole, or whether we wanted individually. When Michael was running the meeting last night, he set up a process where a number of people from both sides of the aisle would be dealing with each issue. In fact, it done really well, I think, and the fact that each issue would have people from both sides of the aisle talking together with it, so we could get a good balanced formulation
That would
of
be a
comments.
substantive way to approach it, clearly to them, as our consultants.
Yes.
Definitely. And going back to that, we need to slot in that concept into the timing of how we as a board want to deal with making comments to Black Oak / Labella on this issue for information that they need to have to make the final supplemental environmental impact statement. So going back to what Michael said at the start, if we bring these papers forward, these, let's call them position papers or advisory situations, I think that the town board the paper that we made out that started this committee basically said that they wanted advisory recommendations from this committee. So if we bring advisory recommendations back, is the next town board meeting soon enough? Should we bring them sooner than that? And when we do bring them, what do we want to do with them?
So, I see 2 ways to go. Wait for the advisory committee and then talk as a board, or the board, which you think strongly should be part of this process, independently voices their concerns. That does not negate the advisory board getting themselves together.
Right.
The advisory board is really designed to provide advice back to the board so we can make that decision and we would have that information.
That was our mandate to
Yeah,
do, yeah.
And-
So you wouldn't have to be
and-
having two tongues.
The reports or the advice back to the board would be able to provide the substantive, summary of our findings that would be helpful during this process, but also as we tackle the town laws too, that could be used for that purpose as
The
well.
town law is a completely,
Yeah, I'm just saying.
completely different process.
Yes, it is, and I'm just mentioning that the same document, the same advice could be used
Well,
in both those cases.
It's the same process.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
the same process.
But what comes out of the advisory board, which I'm not a member of, which is fine, is rather than having separate comments or queries, it seems to me that the advisory board is composed of folks that have, the ability to make these questions or voice these questions and concerns. And how many layers are we gonna have? I mean, as long as they come to the town board first, and we look at them, or is that a necessary process?
Well, the advisory committee will be providing advice via, our reports that we're gonna report back from. Again, we divided into subgroups within the committee. And there's a lot of information to go through, and so we're not gonna subject, if you want to look at the details of this, but we're not gonna subject you to all the documentation, all the science and all this stuff, but we'll provide executive summaries and recommendations back to the board in a more digestible form. So, and this is looking at
And
some.
that's what Labella would, as our, the group we've hired, they would address those, right?
Well, the question is, does that information go directly from the advisory committee to Labella?
No.
Or does it come to the board? And my understanding is it should come to the board.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's designed.
It's
to
an
give
advisory
feedback.
committee to the
Exactly.
board.
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
To the
Designed to
board.
give feedback to the board, and the board can use that information as it sees fit.
I think as a board, we should
Yeah.
should speak to that, yeah.
I think we
What do you
should
mean, speak to it?
I think we should definitely speak to what, we should talk about whatever those recommendations are and come up with some hopefully unified policy that we can say, this sounds like what we want to represent as a town board to this process and put into the mix to be dealt with by
The
Labella.
concerns.
Our concerns, yeah.
But also, the town will eventually have to issue a finding statement, and if there's a negative finding, it has to support that. And this information can be used to support that information, to support that whatever the finding would be.
Did the committee last night set themselves a timeline?
Well, not an end time frame. We know that the next board meeting is on the 13th of April.
You do know that, yes.
I think
Yeah.
it's 4 weeks
So-
still.
So we're working on it. We will be talking about it next Tuesday. So our groups are gonna be getting together.
So nothing in 10 days?
Nothing, and probably not. Because the board, the committee will have to discuss it too. We'll be bringing back information and statuses that we have done so far. And the committee will start to discuss it. So 10 days is kind of a tight time frame for that. That brings up another point, is that we have more than 30 days that we can use during a public comment period. It doesn't have to be 30 days, according to the,
Yes, that's true.
according to the seeker guidelines on the DEC site. It says, when minimum time periods are specified in the seeker regulations, such as a 30-day minimum comment period in a draft, let me see, did I get the right one? Oh, never mind, I've got the wrong. Okay, I got the wrong one. There is no maximum length of time for the public comment period on an accepted draft EIS. Particularly for complex or large actions, a lead agency may reasonably extend the comment period beyond the minimum required 30 days. Such extended comment periods commonly range between 30 and 60 days. If a hearing has been held on the draft EIS, the public comment period must remain open for at least 10 days following the close of the hearing.
I seem to, my memory may be wrong, but I think we had a longer comment period for the law itself. I don't know, I have to.
Well, laws have different,
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
well, they might be the same, but they wouldn't.
Yeah, I would
They
recommend.
would not have one to do with the other.
I would have.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting, I'm just saying.
I would have a longer period, like say 60 days for a public comment period. That would give us, as a committee, the time to report back to the town
I believe we
board.
passed a resolution last Wednesday.
Yeah. We can also extend the time period too.
I
the
will check
resolution.
with Mr. Pavia to see if you get to change your mind.
And that way the committee would have enough time to compile the reports back in time and report back to the board on the 15th. Because with the 30 days, the end was mentioned as the 12th of April.
I believe
Yeah.
that's the day. I didn't bring that piece of paper.
The resolution paper? Yeah, but here somewhere.
Yeah, I think given that this is not a simple seeker document, I would definitely put that in the larger complex category, that we should take the time that we need to do this adequately.
Can I read this, Ann?
Sure.
This is on the second page of the draft environmental impact statement resolution. And it says pursuant to 6 NYCRR 617.9A3 and A411 of the seeker regulations, a comment period during which the public and involved and interested agencies may submit written comments to the town board relating to the DSEIS shall extend from March 12, 2016 to April 12, 2016. In addition, pursuant to this law, there will be a public hearing March 28th, and so forth and so on, with at least 24 days prior notice. But our resolution said that we did end the comment period on April 12, 2016.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I would like to get clarification that we can extend that. Virginia, how do others on the board feel about that?
Well, you can always ask.
Well, I'm asking the other board members.
Oh, I'm not in favor of extending the comment period. We passed a resolution.
If we can change that,
I'm not sure.
possibly change that. Yeah.
Well, I think the issue would be how the town board wants to deal with the comments from the committee and whether we're willing to have another board meeting before the next scheduled board meeting, because the next scheduled board meeting is the day
Yeah.
after this ends.
Well,
Yeah, I think that would be
certainly, this information is leading to another board meeting.
Yes.
But the committee also has to actually produce paper.
Yes, and we need a little bit of time. 10 days is probably not enough time to do that. That gives us one more meeting to do that.
So the question is, can we make those advisory comments in time to be into the board that it has time to act on them before the April 12th deadline?
Well, we can set another board meeting at the beginning of April before that point. that would probably give enough time. That would give us 2 or 3 more meetings to hash it out. But it would be after the hearing. It would be between the hearing and the next official.
Well, the
regular
hearing
board
should
meeting.
have nothing to do with the, I
Right,
mean,
right.
the hearing's gonna have something to do with the committee's comments?
No, I'm just saying it'll be probably between, we don't have time, no. I would have it at the beginning of April, if we're gonna meet at the board next, or we extend
Well,
the
the
time
next
period.
Wednesday after that would be April 6th.
Which is typically a night that the planning board would meet.
Yeah. But
They
we
can meet downstairs.
can meet downstairs.
They can meet in the town hall.
April 6th?
Yeah. I would still like to find out if we can extend the public comment period.
Well, yes, I'll ask that
Okay.
question, yes.
Should we, in the meantime, schedule a board meeting for April 6th?
I think that would be helpful.
Does it seem like? That gives you, I think, 3 more meetings.
I think it would give us, yeah, I think it would give us 3 more meetings. The last one would be right before.
Would be the night before.
Night before.
Exactly.
And I would also encourage board members that have concerns about this final draft also be writing their concerns down on paper.
We
And-
can,
Go ahead,
yeah,
sorry.
we can submit them just as the public would. We just submit them to Alice as a public.
Well, sure you
public
can.
comment, yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I would like to talk about tonight would be just how we want to do our submittal as a board. You know, how we want to go about that process. It would help me to understand that better. And do we want to write something up? Do we want to write up a concise and voluminous statement of all the different issues? Do we want to just make a statement and go over the committee's advisory things? I mean, we could look at all the committee's advisory conclusions and make comments on them, change them if we thought we needed to, and then just submit them as a whole with a statement from the board that says, this is the findings of the committee, we submit this as a comment on the draft supplemental, or do we want to just leave that be as a separate document and then make our own statement on what we want to do and all these different things? I mean, we don't have to decide that tonight, but it just would help me to know. And it
Well,
might-
I think it's going to be much simpler for individual board members to write their concerns.
Mhm. But the main concern I have in relation to it is that if the committee groups are writing something out, if they understood that there was a good possibility or a likelihood that their comments, their advisory positions were going to take the place or going to be put in place as recommendations by the town board, they might be more careful in how they wrote it and how they formatted it and how they expressed it. It's just, if you know who you're writing to and what you're writing for, you're gonna do a better job of addressing the person you're writing to, because you can clarify and focus what you're trying to say to the audience that you're trying to say it to.
You'll come across less like a random.
Well, if you're gonna speak to me, I want actual scientists, I want it vetted by peer scientists, I want actual factual recommendation, I want it in sentences that speak English, I want them in paragraphs that, guess we're having a weather event. I hope it's a weather event and not the,
Thunder out there.
not the furnace.
Oh, it sounds like we're in the park by the car.
No, there was thunder and lightning, I had to go out to my car.
And it has to be substantive.
It is the intent of the committee to come up with recommendations based on the best available information that they can get. And actually, I said something similar to what you're saying last night, that there's an order of things that you should be looking at, peer review, but in some cases, there's just going to be missing information or not good information that we'll have to take as best available information to the town.
Yes, it's a weather event.
Since the weather, that helps.
Strikes me
Something good.
from inside. That'd be what it would be called.
You know, the fact that we have this advisory committee that's been meeting
Yeah.
weekly has a great deal of value in terms of coming up with appropriate, I would say appropriate, but comments that are substantive.
Yeah, it's not the intent of the committee to come up with, shoddy recommendations.
No.
That we've got, different sides, even working on the groups, to balance, the recommendations out, too. So it is, but they'll have to take the, vet the information, that they're looking at and come up with the best available information. Ideally, peer review research, but sometimes that isn't always available.
And sometimes peer reviewed gets a little bit complicated when the study was done by an agency that had an interest in having the study come out the way that they wanted to come out. And the people that reviewed it also had the same interest in having the study come out that they wanted to come out. There are no, I doubt that any large percentage, if any at all, studies get done when there isn't some bias factor in the people conducting the study in terms of some previous understanding that they would like to do. Rarely do studies get done and the money gets spent on them that just say, well, let's figure out what's right here. Unfortunately, that's the way our society works. But if you look at larger context, I mean, you might have a context where the setbacks on wind generators, studies were done that say, well, the Canadian Wind Energy Association did a study for the Canadian government that said that they could find no adverse health effects in wind generators that were 1,000 feet away or more from people's houses. But during the course of that study, and right at the very end, they noted, is that this is just saying that we were not able to prove that there were any adverse health effects to a statistical analysis point that we could draw statistical truths from it and say, yes, we know for sure. It didn't mean that there weren't adverse health effects that were noted. It just means statistically they couldn't analyze them. But if you set that off on the other side of the balance to a situation where you look at the European wind laws that have changed over the course of the last 5 years, to most of the European countries changing their setbacks because of noise and other issues from 1,000 feet to 5,000 feet to 2 kilometers to 5 kilometers. They obviously have something there that's going on, and it wasn't necessarily because they did peer-reviewed scientific studies on it. It may be because that it just became obvious to the people in these countries and to the legislatures that there were real issues there and that they changed the law in recognition of that. So whether something is a peer-reviewed scientific study or not is not necessarily going to be the only factor, I think, in how the Wind Advisory Committee is going to feel like they have to answer a question or answer an issue or find a mitigation to a problem that they feel is there.
Well, your statement was they'd like to know the audience they're speaking to.
Exactly.
I told you what this audience is looking for.
Right, that's good.
You can
Maybe,
accept
Henry, you
it
could tell me what
or
your
not.
feelings are about it, and what your thoughts are.
Well, I've done a lot of reading, and I want to say I really appreciate the work that you put into the committee. I think you've done a great job, and I've learned a lot by attending meetings and reading some of the research. And one thing I've noticed is the word cause and correlation. So they can say there's a direct correlation, but we can't prove a direct cause. For me, correlation is enough. I mean, I think there are people that'll say, well, there's a correlation between smoking cigarettes and cancer, but we don't know the direct cause. Well, you know, the correlation is enough for me. And yeah, I'm skeptical of like the bias in research. So I weigh all the evidence and see what action's been taken in other places. See what effects what has happened to real people, and I put a lot of weight on that. So.
I think, you know, us setting up a balanced committee allows us to have some of those checks and balances in place. So super biased information is just not going to seep through. That people are going to check that.
Do you have any thoughts about that you wanted to bring into it?
Well, having been involved in it from almost day one, I really want to sit back and I have read a lot of the concerns, not the most recent ones, but I remember back on many of the concerns that are voiced now are similar to what they were back in 2008 or 9. And I've been looking at sound effect, you know, the sound of the wind farm, or the windmills and the turbines and the setback, and I just saw everything changes. That doesn't give an excuse to say, okay, but we have a wind law, we have a company that's wanting to move forward, and I think we need to weigh how we look at that, and each of, you know, the supplementary environmental impact statement, I've had a chance to look at. I looked mainly at sound and setbacks, went on the internet, but to be honest with you all, I have not formed an opinion. I don't really want to form an opinion. I want to do more research, because there's a lot of, I think it's called peer review, how people feel about it. And we went through that in 2007 and 8 and 9. And, you know, I'm all for this kind of clean energy. I really am. You know, every time I think about coal and you know, use of gasoline and fuel oil, I mean, I'm changing the way I heat my house at a great expense, but I hope it will, in the long run, prove to be beneficial in a very, very small, minute way. So, you know, maybe that's too on top of the subject, but I'm really concerned that we don't get carried away as a town with minutia, that we look at the whole picture of how it's going to benefit the town or not. If something is radically unsafe or even minutely unsafe for someone who's living near a turbine, then I think it's worth looking at. I don't know if
Makes sense.
I also have been mindful of this project for almost since its inception. I saw a scale model of this project on John Ranchick's kitchen table,
Me too.
probably 15 years ago.
2007.
Or 12 years ago. And I am mindful of this project was approved by the Enfield Town Board as final 12 months ago, 14 months ago. And the project chose to enter into some modifications and went to get this supplemental environmental statement for a modified project. But not too much has changed in this modified project compared to the project that was fully approved by the Enfield Town
You know,
Board
they've
14
reduced the
months
number
ago.
of turbines,
Well, that's from the
yeah,
way back.
way back.
But I'm talking just
Recently.
14 months ago. So I am mindful of that and the bigger picture. And one cannot always please everyone all of the time. There certainly are safety concerns. I think this project all along has been mindful of safety concerns. Certainly, residents very recently have brought up concerns, some of them new, some of them very old.
I'm sorry, Ann, say it again.
That
So, the safety concerns,
some of them new, some of them very old.
yes, I agree.
Since this project began, there's been a lot of new information, and I think we know more detail. I know I've learned a lot just by being on this committee. Lot, 5 months ago, I would have no idea the level of detail we would be getting into.
Well, if I may
on some of
interject,
these.
I remember, unfortunately, when you came to the town planning board for your wind turbine on your property and how I felt so sad that it couldn't be higher.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But that was then the law of the site plan review law.
Yeah,
And it's just, the technology changes, much like our computer industry. If you have a laptop that's more than 2 years old or a computer that's more than 2 years old, you're really dealing with obsolete.
When I put up my turbine, I think it was 10 years ago,
Yeah.
there was no law.
No,
There was
nothing.
there was nothing. It was just-
Conundrum.
I just got issued, a permit to erect. And that was it. That was all it said. And so it was a much simpler process, but I still went through my due diligence. And one of the things that I did when I put up my turbine was the first thing I did was go to my immediate neighbors and ask them how they felt about it. That was the first step for me. I don't think I was obligated to do that, but I did it anyway.
And there's one on Bostic Road that seems to come and go. It must be some kind of an experimental one.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
connected with somebody at Cornell.
Yeah, and that one
Taps
is-
into it or.
Yeah.
And, over the
Whatever.
years, I've been very supportive of renewable energy, including, wind turbine. Obviously, I have one in my backyard, so.
Right.
And so it's, I find myself in an interesting position, trying to, keep a balanced view here. And there's a lot more information that I'm aware of now that I wasn't aware of 5 months ago. And that's important to me. But, I'm trying to keep a balanced view.
But one cannot please everyone all the time. And, there's always this feeling of having been through a similar situation with the development of Longview and Ithaca community about, I don't wanna do this in my backyard, you're gonna do, it goes on from there. But somehow you have to think about with renewable energy, it's really important that we scale down the use of fossil fuels.
And really important that we, if we are gonna build wind farms, do it well
Yeah,
and carefully, so that the information and the press that comes out of it is such that it doesn't convince every other town in New York State and every small town anywhere that this is something that they shouldn't do, because all it does is put neighbor against neighbor and make
Yeah.
it difficult and make it, so people have to live with intolerable situations in their backyard.
But many small towns do have windmills in them. Some without laws, some with laws,
And some rejected them.
and some rejected them. Oh,
And more are rejecting them all the time. More and more towns are making laws that say we don't want any wind in our town.
oh.
in New York State.
One of my, concerns is, I'm not here to stop these, the wind farm. I just want to make sure that what we do is safe and that we're, as a town, we're doing our due diligence and ensure the health and safety. And there are things that we've discovered through this process in the committee that raises health and safety concerns.
Yeah, and having
Yeah.
visited 3
Yeah.
wind farms under the aegis of the town or somebody who got us all
Yeah.
together to take us, and also 2 other wind farms in New York State, including one that had a fire, had a problem,
Yeah.
but it was, again, not the kind of wind farm we're talking about. It was out, basically, there were no dwellings within, I don't want to guess, but maybe a mile.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to say that that kind of occurrence is significant enough to say wind farms are dangerous or wind turbines are dangerous.
Well, one example, a couple ways to think about it is that these are large mechanical devices. I have a small mechanical device in my backyard and I hear it. And we also hear that the failure rate is rare, but I'm not sure wind farms are old enough to be regularly, but we do hear about the breakage, like on the Fenner, which had a couple failures. Just
It was to the same windmill, I've been told.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's one of the
fell
older
down,
ones.
And they put up another one from another company, but they do fail. One of the things that I'm gonna be looking at is, in this process, in my group, is looking at like blade throw and ice throw. I know from my own experience on my turbine that again, it's comparing apples and oranges or maybe oranges and lemons. I'm not sure how you want to qualify that, because one's, they're different, but they're similar in ways that I have had ice throws out. I actually can bring in pictures if you want to see them of ice fragments about that
No, I'm
large.
only concerned
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
those kind of windmills.
But they do, and we've actually, a couple weeks ago, we had, maybe it was a week or so ago, we had, testimony from one expert from Georgia Tech that actually modeled ice throws and breakage of blades and modeled the distribution of where that would occur. And
Same windmill?
he had I think 3 different sizes that he modeled at. But the takeaway was that they do throw ice, and even by GE's own guideline, they have a guideline where they have specified a calculation for a setback for this particular instance, in that they have a calculation based on the 2.3 megawatt 107 that's going to go in. The recommended setback was, I think it's in this draft EIS, the map. So they had an outer circle of about 990 feet. Some of the modeling that was done by this gentleman from Georgia Tech, and there was another similar one done from Uppsala University in Sweden, a very similar kind of model. They actually put it out to like 1,500 feet, depending on the size of the turbine and conditions, in terms of the scatter plot.
So they'll throw a piece of ice.
They will.
Some people think 1,500 feet.
Yes. There were outliers in that, some beyond.
What are
that.
outliers?
Well, there might be 1 or 2 points beyond that point, but there was I don't have the document in front of me, but there was a scatter plot, and there was, clear lines. So that's, some of the information that we're looking at, and looking at that model, and also looking at the GE recommendations. One thing to note in the GE documentation that covers this, they mention a braking system that's part of the that's included, and even in their own guidelines they say it's not reliable. It doesn't always detect it's supposed to detect an imbalance of icing on the blades, but sometimes depending on how the icing occurs, if it's evenly across the blade, it may not detect it in all cases.
I had a question about that.
Yeah.
So I read that too, that it checked for an imbalance and the three blades coat uniformly, which makes sense since they're all spinning in the
Yeah.
same place.
Yeah.
Are there also ice sensors that detect the buildup of ice through another means, that not just imbalance?
I'm not sure the array of sensors that they have in them, but I guess there's probably more than one of them, and there's probably more than different types in terms of checking for lateral. I think one was checking for vibration, and I'm not sure the
Checking for out of balance.
out of balance
Yeah.
and things like that, but in GE's own guideline, I think it was GER 24, so I forget the number, but it's actually on GE Power's own site that they say, well, we have the sensors, but they're not reliable.
Now, can
So-
you lessen my confusion? I've heard that this hub rotates.
Yeah, I would think like any turbine would have to rotate to get the maximum wind that it needs.
360 degrees,
I would, yeah. it would take-
120 degrees,
360.
Yeah,
360.
mine does the same thing, it rotates to try to find the best wind.
Yeah.
Theirs is
like-
probably a little bit more, more calculated, but,
It's the
'cause
simplistic
mine's really simple, it's just, it's just a
Yeah,
tail.
It's a more advanced
Yeah.
version of making
Yeah.
a sail find the best wind.
Yes, yeah, but yeah, it will rotate, so you have to look at the full circle,
Yeah.
the direction of the wind, and this, and they model it based on various scenarios, wind speed, and where it fall off the blade. There's a lot of factors that went into the modeling
Of the ice throws.
of the ice throws, or the blade, if there was a fragment of the blade that fell off. That's just one piece of information that, we'll be writing about.
Are there many recorded instances of blade breakage, throwing blades, or is that pretty rare?
I remember seeing a list of failures at one point, but we will be covering that as well too. I think it would be helpful to actually have that documented, so we know.
Mm.
At
Okay,
least to be able to quantify that.
And I wonder if there are any places that have turbines that size as close to residences as these would be in the US or somewhere in Canada.
There's 4 on the children, within spitting distance of the Children's Museum in Cleveland, Ohio.
Not these turbines, so
Not these.
these are brand new, and I think there's only one place in the US right now that they're even installed. They're selling them, and they want them to be installed many places, and they have orders to put them in places, but they haven't been installed in very many places yet.
No, the ones in Cleveland have been there for many years.
They're huge turbines.
And can I please
They're
say
industrial
something?
turbines.
Can I please say something? There's one
There is
turbine-
no public, it is very precise on the agenda, there is no public session.
Okay, I'll send
This
you an
is a
email.
meeting for the board to discuss. It is an open meeting and people can observe.
There were a couple of issues I did want to bring up that got brought up at the committee meeting. One of them was someone was concerned that we definitely were going to send out the letters to the people within 500 feet of the town board is required to send out letters to anyone within 500 feet of a wind turbine, who has property within 500 feet of a wind turbine.
Because they wouldn't have a
Well,
well.
who's gonna do that?
But the town is required to.
Well, I've never been told.
Now, it is in the requirements of the public hearing.
I don't think it was the town board. I think that Black Oakland Farm was going to send the notices.
Black Oak will send,
It
that's what I'm
doesn't,
asking
yeah,
about,
it doesn't
yeah.
say who,
Right.
but when I
People that have
questioned
Property
that,
lines
should-
within 500 feet of a turbine.
when I questioned it, I believe that someone told me that it was the
And
Black
does-
Oak Wind Farm was going to do
Do we
that.
know if Black Oak does that?
Yes,
I don't know if
they have in the past.
And you've had actually evidence that they have?
No?
Because a few of the people at the meeting last night said that we live within 500 feet and we never got any notices.
Yes,
So,
I've heard that.
So
Well,
you're saying, I'm sorry,
You want proof?
I want clarification. They're saying they never got notice from anyone that
About
there's
the
going to
public
be
hearings.
public hearings, or that there's going to be a turbine within 500 feet of their dwelling,
no.
their
If
property line?
there is a turbine within 500 feet of their property line,
Right, okay.
then they're supposed to receive notice of public
Yeah,
hearing.
that's what I understood, property line.
Right.
And what would constitute proof?
Somebody getting a letter, somebody at Black Oak showing us that they have a list of people and,
A list of people?
well, a list of people and them saying, gee, we did that yesterday, you know, I mean.
And the postage?
Well, if someone actually was talked to and you said, did you get all those letters out to those people? And they said, yes, we did, here's the list of who we sent them to, that would be pretty
Okay
good
with
proof
you?
to me.
All right.
But then we certainly could ask people at the next committee meeting that live within 500 feet or that have.
Their property line is within
within
500 feet.
If they've
of-
gotten letters,
yeah,
right,
it's-
simple enough,
I
yeah.
just wanted to clarify it in my mind. It's their property line, it's not their dwelling.
Another question that was asked was if it would be all right for them to put up a sign of the public meeting on town property where where Alice's office is.
Yeah, on that side's good.
Sorry?
On the town hall side, it's good.
Right,
I am,
yeah. Like they do chicken barbecues and things like that.
that's not on town.
Not on fire department, but a sign like they do for chicken barbecues.
A sign like,
Right.
I've got, no. But it can't be on the other side because I'm prayerful that, that
Parkinite.
site will get
Right, that sounds good. Yeah, they can put it on the site.
finished.
Yeah.
Another issue that got brought up at the meeting last night was someone who had a friend or a connection with the town of Newfield that said they were having a meeting tonight, a board meeting tonight, and were planning on implementing a moratorium for wind generators in the town, 60 days, 90 days. And I was wondering if there's any process that we should use to keep in touch with that, or maybe have anything to do with that process, or just kind of let it play out, see what happens, or,
The town supervisor did email me today that he will meet with me on what to do next. I was offering that as someone who had sort of been through this process before. He did add at the bottom of the email that they were having a town board meeting and they were going to, it intimated to me they were going to vote on having a moratorium. But I do not recall that he stated when the meeting was.
yeah, someone had told me tonight, but it may be true, it may not be, but I'm wondering, it does relate to this draft supplemental, because one of the locations that they anticipated was in the town of Newfield. It was one of the choices. It doesn't have to be in the town of Newfield,
Right.
but it does limit their choices then to only the 2 locations rather than 3. at that point.
We are the lead agency. I am not familiar off the top of my head with what the process is to institute a moratorium. I am assuming he has checked with his legal people, but I don't know. I just found this out later this afternoon. I'm not sure what Town of Newfield's procedure has to do with our procedure.
Well,
I will
that's-
be asking that.
That's exactly my question, yeah.
Because one of the proposed turbines is in Newfield, so that would definitely, if that moratorium were in effect, that would definitely affect the location of Site A, proposed Site A as one of the options.
Right, and it may,
It would just push because there's three, they're moving two turbines completely, so there's three possible locations for those two turbines. Site A is in Newfield, and Site B and C are near each other on, I forget which road it is, but that would mean that those two turbines would move to Site B and C if
right.
that were a moratorium in place.
And my question was, as lead agency, is there anything that we need to do in relation to this? That's really what I was concerned with.
As their board, well, I'm pretty sure there's nothing we do in relation to their process, but I will
To the
certainly
Black Oak,
be.
no, I don't mean in terms of Newfield, in terms of Black Oak. And how we deal with this, whether it makes any difference in how we deal with this draft supplemental environment, in text segment, or if everything just stays the same and we just go on about our business and don't have to think about it.
What possible,
Well, if you're a
Right.
lawyer, you certainly can come up with possibles, they always do.
I see.
So,
I see.
that's, I
I
don't
see.
know a possible, but I'm just
oh,
wondering if there is a possible, and there's,
Oh.
if this actually may impact in some way, maybe because now it's incorrect, there is incorrect information in here, now maybe it has to be redone, I don't know. That's all, was my concern.
what incorrect information?
Incorrect information is that Newfield is a possible site. If Newfield puts a moratorium on it,
They
then,
have to move a
then,
turbine.
then Newfield won't be a possible site at that point.
Well, it may not be as much of a fact because they have three possible locations for
That's
two turbines.
exactly
Yeah, they have
So
other
they still have
plans,
two
B and
left.
C.
Yeah, and they still have options B and C, so I suspect that probably wouldn't be as much of an issue.
Probably
But
not.
It would have been if they only had two proposed sites.
I just know that
Yeah,
legal
just use Newfield.
sometimes is not always logical, sometimes it has to do with precedent rather than logic,
Yeah.
so. I just wondering if it's something we need to look into or not.
Well, I'm going to meet with him and I can ask him his opinion.
Well, it seems like Frank would be the one that would have an opinion on that, if anybody.
More valued opinion.
Yeah.
But that would be, just to make sure, to understand.
Well, just so we don't go ahead and run through the whole process and then find out that it was a legal flaw in it and we have to start all over again and that we jumped the gun.
Hmm.
That did happen once before in the process and would be good not to do it again, probably.
No, let's revisit that again.
The other thing I certainly should add to the conversation is that I have reread Don Barber's letter to members of the town board that he wrote in February.
Tom Caroline?
Town of Caroline. And I do value Don's opinion quite highly, and he did suggest that we keep in contact with our town attorney on effects of our actions, and I would certainly like to keep conferring with our town attorney, Guy Crow, on matters before us.
I don't think there's really any debate on that, is there?
And he also did note that we could ask legal counsel to negotiate with Black Oak Farm for additional mitigation measures.
We also have that option in the finding statement too,
Yes.
to demand it as a town.
So I keep Frank's email on the the time, or the different steps, and I also keep Mr. Barber's letter kind of
I
on
think
top
that,
of the
I think
pile.
it's great advice from Don. One of the issues that came up in the process of the advisory committee was that Peter Bardaglio was quite clear that he didn't feel, in his understanding of what a corporation can and can't do, that there was any way that the Black Oak Wind Farm could actually negotiate in any way, and any issues that were significant in relation to the establishment, the development, the building of the wind farm. He didn't feel like, as a corporation, they actually could negotiate from a position of give and take. Yeah, sure, happy to, you give us this, we'll give you that, whatever. My understanding, although he didn't see this directly, was that the only way that they can actually change anything is if they're forced to or required to change something by some outside agency. And that's actually come up a number of times in the committee meetings, and I don't think he's really changed that position.
I don't think so.
So it makes it a little more problematic in terms of how to go about the process, which is one of the reasons why I keep asking about the process with the draft and the final and the finding statement, all that thing, because it seems like if there are things that are really important to the town to get in terms of mitigation measures or whatever it may be, any kind of concessions we're going to ask for from Black Oak Wind Farm, if any of it has to do with costs that they would incur by agreeing to, my understanding was that Black Oak wouldn't be able to do that without an enforcement agency actually requiring them to do it. At which point they could decide whether the enforcement agency was within their rights to ask those things and sue if they felt that it wasn't within their rights, or they could decide that they could just say, okay, we won't do that, we're not going to do this anymore, or they could say, yes, we will now negotiate with you because you're forcing us to the negotiation table to do this. Which wasn't what we wanted to do originally, but it seemed like that was,
At least he was very clear about that at a couple meetings.
yeah, it seemed like what Peter felt was the only option that he had.
Mhm.
I don't like to be speaking for him, but I think
No.
I'm not trying to, but I think, we can check with him and see, but I think he would say that.
Well, I think the board has to be very mindful of the whole process and the fact that we did pass this as final 14
Right.
months ago. And
Right.
I'm not sure how many rules can be changed.
Yeah, well, that's, as part of the process with the committee as well, there was some time spent.
Conditions.
I spent some time with Guy Crow to try and understand what possible options would be in terms of a legal option that the town would have in relation to this situation. And he was pretty clear about what he thought the town could do and couldn't do. We brought that to the committee meeting so they would have an understanding of the process, and we've been trying to develop, I think, to a degree within those parameters that are the legal parameters that we would have to try and do this within, basically.
But is it your understanding that there are a limited amount of new requirements we can put on?
Not so much limited per se, but, sorry, my mind is failing me again tonight. But there are only certain kinds of new requirements and certain conditions that allow us to do new requirements. So,
Yes.
and which makes them limited in some degree, but it's more specific actually to the kinds of things you can do.
Yes.
For instance, the seeker process does not allow economic considerations to be taken into account. So someone
That's
can
not
say,
part of it.
my property value is going down. We can't, as a board, respond to that. We can't do anything about the fact that their property value would go down, unless inadvertently, in terms of dealing with some other issue, we also protect their property values at the same time. But economic issues are not allowed to be
They're not
used.
part of the list
Right,
that they
right.
look at.
But Guy was pretty clear about saying that if it comes to health and safety issues for residents of the town that are true health and safety issues,
Substantive.
substantive health and safety issues, that actually then it becomes to a degree the town's responsibility to at least address them and find a way to address them. And I think, the issue is, the environmental impact statements do address them as well. It's just that there's so much going on out there, and it's such a new thing. And it's kind of like Henry was saying before, cigarettes are bad for you. Well, we mostly know now that cigarettes are bad for you, and there is a correlation there. But there are still a whole lot of people that smoke cigarettes their whole life and live to 110 and say, best thing I've ever done is smoke cigarettes. It calms me down, makes me feel better. There are a whole lot of people out there with wind generators on their doorstep that say, I like it, it's great, it doesn't bother me any, I'm getting some money from it, and good thing. And then there are other people who say, I can't sleep at night, I'm going crazy, I have to take medications every day to live here. I have to move out of my house, I can't stay here anymore. It's very specific to the individual, to the person that's being dealt with, which makes it a really difficult problem, first of all, to prove that there are real issues there because they're not consistent throughout the population. And it's a really difficult issue to know how to mitigate the effects of, because it doesn't happen to everybody. And the effects tend to be ones that, it's not like you're sitting there bleeding from your arm or your leg is chopped off. You go to bed at night and you can't sleep because this sound is in your ears, and there's this low frequency sound coming into your house, and you can feel it vibrating around you. This stuff really happens. Some people feel it, some people are affected by it, and some people don't. And it makes it really hard to know how to deal with it. It's hard to know to any of these folks. You can say they're afraid of it happening. I would say more they're concerned with it happening. That they're concerned that they're going to be stuck in a place that they can't live anymore. They can't sell for anywhere near the value of what they bought it for or what they put into it. So they can't move, and they're stuck. They can't do it. And there's anecdotal evidence of any number of people that have had to move out of their houses and basically leave their house sitting there by the wind tower and go live somewhere else. And they go back to their house and they get their clothing, and they say within 5 minutes of being in their house, they start to get nauseous and start to get a headache and have to leave right away because they can't stand being there. I know these people aren't lying. I know they're not just making this up in order to get things. And I don't think it's a grand scheme of the wind energy opponents to say we're going to figure out a way to make it so nobody can have any wind. There's almost no downside to wind except for the fact that being close to it has some effects on the people. It tends to hurt people. So it's really a difficult thing to know what to do about. We want the wind energy. Everybody on that wind committee has expressed the desire to try and make this happen because they want it to happen. Nobody has felt like they didn't want it to happen at all. But they just don't know how to do it and feel like they can be assured that they're going to be able to live their lives, so that they really are concerned. Long speech, but.
Other discussion?
Well, you said financial issues can't be considered. Guy said that?
No, that online in the New York State CEC website, there is a very long seeker guidebook, let's say it is. So the seeker law is 617.9. that is very legally, that says this is what you have to do, so forth and so on. But there is then a list of questions, probably 300 questions and answers in this guidebook that says, okay, what do we do with the draft environmental impact statement? And it lists this. They're really good for the town. If the town is wanting to know how to deal with these things, it gives you the dates and the times that you can do it in, you know, tells you how long this period can be, how long that can be. It defines the terminology much more clearly. And it says, okay, what does it mean by this when it says this? And it says, okay, this is what it means. And it defines and clarifies and enlarges on, expands the definitions of some of the phrases that they say. So if they say economic, you can't deal with economic issues, well, it goes on to say, well, what are economic issues? And it says, okay, here are some examples of what economic issues you couldn't use as a problem or a question that you're gonna say, you have to change this because you're not allowed to do this. Well, if you're saying that it takes property value away from my house, that actually is not an issue that's allowed in the seeker, because the seeker is an environmental impact statement, and loss of property value is not an environmental impact per se. If there is something connected with that loss of property value that then also has an environmental impact issue, then you can bring it up as a valid complaint or a valid current question or concern. But it's really interesting. These questions are really interesting. Like I said, there's probably 300 of them, and you probably spend 3 or 4 hours some night looking at them if you want to. But they really do give you an overview of the process that's much more clear and developed and whole. So, and I don't pretend to know it all. I've just read through them once is all. But I keep going back to them.
Yeah, I've been reading through a little bit more lately too, to understand the process more. And I remember reading specifically about what you just said,
Yeah.
about the socio and economic impact that can't be considered in a draft EIS. It's mainly focused on environmental impacts. I can't find it in here, so I can't read it off.
It's in there.
It's
Yeah.
in there somewhere.
I think it's page 129.
Oh my
I've got the
God.
I've got the online version of it, so I don't know what section that's in.
I printed out
Yeah.
a whole bunch of pages is also, and just because they were the most
Yeah,
relevant.
but it is in there. You know, to summarize what Mike said, and from my own perspective, you know, my main concern going through this process is the health and safety concern. And like I said, there's a lot more information that I've learned and read about, you know, relevant information that, you know, raises some concern.
Yeah, it's a tough situation
Yeah.
because it's not really fair to put new unrealistic restrictions on Black Oak, but I don't think it's fair to put people that live near those wind turbines, put their health at risk and put them in a situation where they, like these folks you mentioned, they can't stay there and they can't sell either. Although, I'm not sure selling would be a problem. I know there are a number of, well, at least 2 big dairy farmers I know in Schuyler County that are always looking to buy new property. I'm sure they'd be interested up there, but.
Yeah, these are folks that have a little lot with a house on it, so they're not probably in that
Yeah.
position, but.
It's not that easy to uproot a
No,
place
it's
that
still,
you've lived all
yeah,
your
oh,
life.
yeah,
It's
it's
not-
still.
That's generally not an
it's
option.
still a heavy
It's-
burden,
You can't
yeah.
ask people to do that.
Mhm.
So can you name 3 of the health and safety concerns? Substantive.
Go ahead.
Well, three of the issues that, some of them we're looking at are noise and sound issues.
Including infrasound.
Including infrasound, so that's looking at, failure, blade throw, ice throw, that's another one, those are another key ones. And factoring to all this stuff are some of the setbacks, because some of the ways you mitigate some of these things are to have appropriate setbacks. So that's sort of like an after, that's sort of a mitigation factor on that. Lightning, fire, emergency situations.
Probably a significant one is flicker too.
Yeah, flicker and shadow. I think some of that addresses here. I haven't read that section yet, but that's.
Yes, there's quite a section on those,
I
and
didn't-
there
I
has
didn't-
been.
I didn't really think about flicker at all until I actually saw a video that showed a house with flicker going through the house. And I
Yeah.
thought, whoa, that's
Um,
tough to live with for hours and hours a day.
I'm looking at my turbine, which has shadow. It doesn't have flicker so much because
Yeah.
it's black blades, but it does have shadow, and I can see it on the brush and tree line
Yeah.
at the certain times of the day. And mine's only like a 22-foot diameter blade, and I can see the shadow clearly. But those things are also easier to model, and they can model that much easier. So it's more of a known.
It is, yeah. And the problem is that for most people, it's not really a health issue, but if you have neurological issues, it could very well be a significant health issue. So it's a very unusual health issue, but it can
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, you go into seizures,
Yeah.
potentially. I had a friend in college that was epileptic, and just certain things would set him off.
Yeah,
But, I think, again, I haven't looked at that section, but that's probably an easier thing to model.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they tried to be very careful about it and lessen it as much as possible. Because there were a lot of factors that had them moving turbines left, right, and center.
Because they know where the turbine locations are, they know where the residents are,
Yeah.
and fortunately, our sun and moon patterns are regular.
Right,
So that's why
right,
it's easy
there's
to
a lot
model.
of hard information on which to do a simulation or
Yes.
there's
And I-
another word that they,
And I think they've done that. Again, I haven't looked at it, so I can't really speak to
Yeah.
how they address
yeah,
that, so,
they've done it.
Yeah, there are some issues that don't appear at first sight too, that are, you have to kind of read between the lines, or you have to understand the parameters of how the answers are phrased. And you have to understand that some of the information in the statements are generic information. They don't know what the sound level of the GE 2.3 turbine is. They don't know what sound it's going to produce. They're not, and very many of them out there, and GE won't release that information to the public. So
Yeah.
there's no way of really knowing what the sound levels are going to be on those 2.3 turbines. So there's no way for them to actually be able to be positive, concisely, exactly about what the sound levels are going to be. Which is one of the reasons I'm concerned with problem resolution in the future, because they're things.
I guess I'll have to reread that because I thought it was quite clear on the
Well, it's
sound levels.
it's new turbines is the thing. And the new turbines have a different sound level than the old turbines did.
And that's gonna change as the industry grows, it changes just like computers
Right.
and whatever else.
Yeah, they're taller and they have wider blades and
Yeah.
just what's going on.
I'm not making light of it, I'm just saying that's the way things go.
Right, exactly, yeah.
I thought the sound levels were quite definitive.
Pardon me?
I thought the sound level section was quite definitive
Yeah.
here.
Well,
I guess I
the thing
will
about sound
have
levels is
to,
that
reread
they say certain amount of decibel reading. That doesn't mean that they're always gonna be that decibel reading. That's the average. So you might have a time when the decibel readings are quite a bit higher than that, and you may have times that they're quite a bit lower than that. You have 8-hour readings for an 8-hour period. You have 1-hour readings. You have different ways to measure what the decibel levels are. But long term, you could wind up dealing with fairly high decibel levels going to fairly low decibel levels. The problem with that is that information, that thing happening, is actually much more difficult to deal with health-wise, psychological-wise, than a constant sound. So something going like that, that's tough because you can't ignore it as white noise anymore. You have to be aware of it because your mind is, that's what our minds and our bodies do. We be aware of changes in our environment around us, and that's how, it's a safety flight factor that we do, so.
Yeah. Plus our law doesn't, this is a separate issue, not the draft, but it doesn't go into the level of detail in terms of the requirements that we should have had in place.
It was done
in measurements
quite a long
and-
time ago,
yeah, it was
yeah,
done,
before
yeah.
people really realized and understood
Yeah.
all the parameters involved with projects like
Yeah,
this.
different ways to measure, there's different levels of sound, from infrasound to auditory sound that you can actually hear, different ways of weighting the sound measurements, and how do you monitor that afterward. So that-
Yeah.
It's really, our law doesn't go into that level of detail, but it does, it is an environmental impact. And a health and safety
Which is
impact.
addressed in the old one, the new one, right?
Yeah, there is a section on that.
You have to address it every time, yes.
Yes.
You have to address noise
These
every
are
time.
new turbines and
Yeah.
new sightings, so.
Unfortunately, in the mitigation section, it often ends by saying, it hasn't been proven that this is a problem, therefore we don't feel any need to do any mitigation in relation to this.
Yes.
So that's kind of the answer. So,
Yeah.
and to some degree, it's not gonna help anybody.
Do we have other issues to, subjects to discuss regarding the wind farm?
Do we wanna have that meeting?
April 6th.
April
6th, I
6th.
think. yeah.
Great, that's good.
6th, right?
April 6th.
I
I think it was
Second.
Whatever that, was it a Wednesday?
It's a
Oh, it's
Wednesday.
back to March now.
Yeah, they don't know how
We're gonna
to
have
do a
meet
traveler's
down on the
calendar.
mice.
What's that?
We had to meet down on the mice.
Maybe, with the food pantry.
Yeah,
And the
I'm
mice.
kidding.
Maybe there won't be any business.
Yeah.
April 6th.
Maybe the planning board won't have business that night.
Yeah.
7's a better time?
Yes, please.
7 is usually a better time.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Call the vote.
Councilperson Bryant?
Aye.
Councilperson Carpenter? Councilperson Hanson?
Call the vote to end the meeting?
Yeah, I guess so.
You say no, Henry.
All right,
Get the vote.
majority rules.
Majority rules, okay.